Another sort of interesting example of a gospel narrative which people might have good reason to think was invented by the author, I think, are the birth narratives, found in only 2 of the Gospels, with some discrepancies and seemingly written in some cases with motivations in mind. These are earlier, and these are in Gospels which, at least in the... Well, they, as you said earlier, they seem to be sort of aware of each other's existence and copying each other, aware of earlier Gospels, because the birth narratives occur in the Synoptic Gospels. In this instance, are we not provided with an example of clear evidence of forgery? I mean, somebody sort of creating a story which seems to sort of not exist anywhere else, putting it in their gospel narrative, in some cases seemingly in order to fulfill a prophecy or something like this. Like, is this an example of something that we can confidently say that the authors who are writing about it didn't actually think or have good reason to think that it happened?
I don't think so. I don't think that's right. I think that, in fact, I don't think Matthew and Luke. So it's in Matthew and Luke, and they both have a virgin birth story. And you're right; they have things in common. The things they have in common are the very broad things. Jesus has a mother named Mary and a father named Joseph, and she gets pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and Jesus gets born in Bethlehem, so that he's born of a virgin in Bethlehem. That's basically it. But all of the other details are different. That means, though, that if you've got a virgin birth story of him being born in Bethlehem, and they both have it, most scholars think that Matthew and Luke did not know about each other's work. Okay? That means that idea was floating around more broadly, that it's not made up by either one of them. See what I mean? Because since they both have it,
sure.
Neither one of them made it up. But the details are all vastly different. One of the things I do with my students at Chapel Hill is I have them, they don't know what they're going to find. And I don't tell them what they're going to find. They know the Christmas story because every year they go to church and they hear the Christmas story where you get the wise men and you get the shepherds and you get the Jerusalem, you get the Herod slaughtering the innocents and things. So what I have them do is have them read Matthew and just make a list. A, B, C, D, E. This is the list of what happens in Matthew. This is it. Then I have them read Luke and make the same list for Luke. This is this. Then I have them compare the lists and to find out what's different and is there anything that cannot be reconciled. It blows their minds because, I mean, people can do this very easily. Just do it. You realize, whoa, like Matthew has all of these stories that Luke doesn't say anything about. Luke has all this stuff. And not in Matthew, and in fact, there are points where they cannot be reconciled.
Such as what? What are we talking about here?
Well, for example, in Luke's gospel, after Jesus is born, I'll give you an irreconcilable one.
Yeah.
After Jesus is born, his parents have him circumcised on the 8th day, and then after 32 days, Mary has to make an offering in the temple.
Yes.
To cleanse herself for her ritual impurity for having given birth. She does that. And so within about a month and a half, and then they go straight back to Nazareth where they came from. Mm-hmm. Okay? All right. So basically a month and a half after Jesus' birth, they return to Nazareth, which is about 100 miles to the north up in Galilee. They're in Jerusalem in the south, 100 miles north to go back home to Nazareth. To Nazareth. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus is born, and Joseph is warned that Herod is now going to try and kill the child. And so Joseph takes the family and goes down to Egypt. And it takes a while to get to Egypt. They go down to Egypt, and they stay there till Herod dies. And then they want to return, and when they hear that Herod dies, word gets to them, then they come back. They can't resettle in Bethlehem like they want. They resettle in Nazareth. Okay? So if all that's right, if Matthew is right that they went down to Egypt for months or years or however long, how can Luke be right that they immediately returned to Nazareth?
And what is the answer to that question from a sort of from
I
the
don't
perspective
know.
of a Christian?
I don't know. I mean, you have to make something up. I mean,
And what do people? I mean, presumably this is something that Christian scholars are aware of. What do they say?
yeah. Right. So I guess to reconcile it, you'd have to say something like so one way to reconcile it would be to say that so they returned to Nazareth, and then they decided to come back to Bethlehem, and they stayed in Bethlehem for a while. And then they Herod found out, and then they fled to Egypt. Then they returned to Nazareth. I mean, you'd have to come up with some complicated scenario. But my point is that I don't think that Matthew and Luke this is my ultimate point. I don't think they were making up the story. I think both of them had heard stories. And a big problem with the Gospels is that they are written, the earliest Gospel is probably Mark. It's probably at least 40 years after Jesus' death by somebody who wasn't there. And Matthew and Luke are 50, 60 years after Jesus' death. They weren't there. They weren't Aramaic-speaking Jews in Israel. They spoke Greek. They lived in some other part of the world. They've inherited stories. And so my sense is that most of the time they're just giving their version based on stories that they've heard in their own Christian communities.
The full conversation that the clip you just watched was taken from is available via the link that's on your screen. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.